is it not? Oh, stop.
This wonderful day in paradise.
Hello.
How are you all doing? I understand some of you cannot see our screen because you're calling in. So you will be missing out on some amazing pictures, but don't fret because I am going to send this presentation to Sarah when we're done. And it can be linked through Google Documents. You know, there's many ways that you can get to that later. And you're gonna get all the links that will take you to the IPM website where you can see actually most of those pictures of the things we're gonna be talking about. So don't worry if you don't, you know, get the pictures today, and sometimes that makes a difference and you may not realize what I'm actually referring to. But it will all become clear eventually. And maybe I should introduce myself first. I'm Gabrielle, for those of you who don't know me yet. Everybody present here knows me, but people who may be watching this later may not know me. I am the current coordinator of the Lake County Master Gardener program. Not for very much longer, I'm retiring in a month. But I will still be a Master Gardener then. And today, we're gonna be talking about a topic that's a huge topic, and obviously in a little less than an hour, we're just gonna be scratching the surface of that. But I'm hoping that I'm gonna be able to give you the tools to actually access all the information you're gonna need in the future, with including our phone number where you can call us with questions, and the links to go to sites that we use where you can find the answers to a lot of your questions. I made a little presentation with some nice pictures. So I'm gonna start screen sharing now. And oops, what happened? No, I don't wanna leave this meeting. Hang on a minute, why is the screen share not happening? Oh, here. Can you all see my screen? Sarah, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. If you
Okay,
want to make it a full screen, that
yeah,
would.
I make it a full screen. I just wanted to make sure you can actually see what I see here.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back here. That was the end of the presentation. So we're talking about pests in the vegetable garden here. That topic is called in the vegetable garden because when you're dealing with an orchard or an ornamental garden, you actually have a slightly different set of pests. Vegetable garden pests are a special kind. It's the kind that like to eat the things we like to eat. So a lot of us are really into sustainable gardening, whether you are an organic gardener or you call yourself a sustainable gardener, or you just don't want to use any toxins if you can avoid it. We're all in the same boat with that. We want to use as little toxic products if possible in our garden. So we want to run our garden in a way that you can eat everything without having to worry about what's on it. And the key to having a sustainable, non-toxic vegetable garden is really prevention and early detection. Those are the two magic words, because we do not have the big guns at our disposal to take care of the problem when it has already turned into an infestation. Being sustainable means nipping every problem in the bud, literally. And in order to do that, we need to approach the issue from many different angles. And one of the important things we need to do is nurture our allies in the fight against pests. Who are our allies? Our allies are a multitude of beneficial insects, and I call them for short often just beneficials. So when I say beneficials, what do I mean? I mean pollinators, such as the different, bees, hoverflies, butterflies, moths, etc. But I also mean insects that help us get rid of what we call the bad guys. Of course, the bad guys, it's just a relative thing. Bad guys are just insects that like the same food that we like. So they're bad guys from the human perspective. And there is a lot of insects out there that like to eat these bad guys. They are called predators or predatory insects. And I'll show you some pictures later. And then there is the other group of our helpers that are called parasitic insects. They are, for the most part, little tiny wasps, just about a millimeter or a millimeter and a half long. You can see them with your naked eye, but you might not notice them if you don't pay attention. And these parasitoids, what they do is they lay their eggs into the larvae of the insects that eat our vegetables. And that egg then hatches inside the caterpillar larvae and eats the caterpillar from the inside out. It's a really gruesome thing. It's the stuff of science fiction movies, but these are the insects that help us keep the bad guys in check. And so what we want to do is keep those insects around. We want to keep as many of those around as possible. A lot of these insects are native. These beneficial insects are native. And in order to complete their life cycle from egg to adult and back to laying eggs, they actually have evolved with certain specific native plants that they need to complete their life cycle on. The larvae of the, of the monarch, for instance, needs milkweed to feed on. If you don't have any milkweed, no monarchs. And just like that, a lot of these beneficial insects have co-evolved with really specific native plants that they need to complete their life cycle on. Now, they will sip nectar or eat from many other plants, including introduced European species, but they still need that plant that they evolved with to complete their life cycle on. And because of that, when we create a habitat, meaning an area that those beneficial insects like to hang out in, that they like to live in, we always recommend leaving a part of our garden or landscape wild, if you can, if you have a kind of landscape where you can leave a patch wild. Now, wild does not mean untended and overgrown with invasive European weeds. Wild means preserving the native plants that are already there, or if you don't have that, plant some native plants in your garden that these insects can thrive on and complete their life cycle on. So that's one part of creating a habitat for beneficial insects. And the other part is just planting a lot of flowering herbs that they like to dine on. The picture you see on my screen is the umbel. Umbel is a multi-flowered head. We call that an umbel. Comes same root as umbrella, of a wild carrot. And you can see there that there is at least 5-6 different insects. Three of them look like honeybees. The others look like native insects. One actually looks like a parasitic wasp. And they are, sipping nectar and eating pollen from this wild carrot flower. So I found that most of the culinary herbs that we like to grow anyway, such as thyme, oregano, marjoram, basil once it flowers, many of those culinary herbs, as a matter of fact, most of them make great foraging plants for beneficial insects. So I found that in my garden, the big patch of thyme I have is buzzing like crazy with beneficial insects of all kinds all the time. So it's not hard to create habitat for them. You plant a few native plants, you plant some culinary herbs, and these insects will come. And they are our allies because they help us keep the pest insects we don't like in check. That's part of it. The other part of prevention is, and with prevention, I mean preventing bed bugs from taking a hold in large numbers. The other part of prevention is, of course, not using any toxic products that kill the beneficial insects that help us. And for most of you, that's understood and automatic, but not for everybody. That's why I'm mentioning it here. A third very important part of preventing insect infestations is what we call cultural control. And what that means is we want to make sure that our vegetables are not stressed. We all know that humans, when they are stressed, tend to get sick easier than when they are not stressed. And the same is true for every living being, including plants. So when plants are stressed, they literally send out chemical signals that get picked up by pest insects that attracts these pest insects to come and feed on them and finish them off. This is not something I make up. It's not a woo-woo new age theory. This has been proven by botanists who've been studying this. So what means stress for a plant? When a plant is stressed, it can be water stress, like the plant doesn't get enough water, that's a stressor. Weather is too hot for that particular species. And that's kind of a funny thing because vegetables, for the most part, have evolved in a climate very unlike what we have in Lake County. So a vegetable, with few exceptions, but vegetables are basically stressed all the time in Lake County if we don't take really good care of them, because it's much hotter, much drier than where they were originally bred. Most vegetables were bred in areas like humid, warm, humid areas like Asia or in Europe, where it's, you know, the sun is not as intense, it's not quite as hot, the air is not quite as dry, water is not scarce. So vegetables get super easily stressed because this is really not their native habitat. It couldn't be any more different. And so that's why they need extra care to be comfortable, so to speak, and not stressed. So you want to do everything you can to make sure your vegetables have as little stress as possible. And that means watering regularly on time, if possible, at the same time every day. Don't wait till they are wilted. Never let the soil completely dry out. There is not a single vegetable I'm aware of that likes it when the upper 6 inches of the soil completely dry out. It's a no-no. When we transplant them, you know, they go into shock unless they're handled very carefully. You don't want to disturb the root system any more than necessary. You want to shade them after transplanting if the weather is really hot, because all these stressors contribute to the plant going in decline and literally sending out cries of help chemically, which attracts insects to them, the kind of insects that feed on that plant and finish it off. So making sure our plants are not stressed, and now whether that is regular watering, putting up shading, whatever you need to do, supplying adequate nutrients in terms of fertilizer, compost, all that is part of keeping plants not stressed. And that goes a long, long way toward preventing infestation of what we call bad insects. The other thing I want to emphasize is, before you even plant your plants, we want to choose cultivars that are suitable for our area, if you can, if you have that option. So when you go through the catalog, your seed catalog, look at the description in the seed catalog. Is this a plant that does well in great heat? Is this a plant that likes milder weather? You know, is this a plant that takes a long time to fruit or not? I always recommend choosing short season varieties for Lake County, because no matter how hot it is here, our growing season is relatively short. And the short season varieties have a much better chance of making it from seeding or transplanting to harvesting without getting intercepted by pests, diseases, environmental problems. So choosing short season varieties is one of the tools. I'm gonna I go to my next slide because you can see a little bit. I'm gonna move that. So reserving patches of wildflowers or domesticated herbs, gonna minimize that. You can see this is from my garden, a picture. It's the border of my garden just next to the fence. And I planted a huge amount of flowering herbs and wild plants there that the beneficial insects can dine on and hang out all day. This is what attracts them. They don't get attracted by vegetables. They may come to your vegetables and help you get rid of the bad guys, but what attracts them to your garden in the first place is these plants here. It's not the vegetables. Another thing I want to mention here, while I see that picture, you can see in the upper left, it's part of my garden where there's 2 beds in the spring, right around this time. It's not from this year, but it's right around this time. And there's still a crop of fava beans in those beds that I've planted as a cover crop. On the bottom left, you see what the fava beans look like flowering. On the bottom right, you see what they look like when they produce beans. And right now, I've just harvested the last beans of my fava cover crop. So, you know, this picture was taken just a little earlier than right now, but you can see right around the beds, there is thousands of flowers, wildflowers and domesticated herbs and flowers that have kind of naturalized around the beds that I keep there intentionally and water and cultivate to attract beneficial insects. And this looks fantastic. And a lot of these flowers have multiple uses. They're not just there to attract beneficial insects. The calendula in the top left is also used as an edible flower. The Johnny Jump Ups, the purple Johnny Jump Ups that you see at the bottom of it are edible flowers. So a lot of these plants have multiple uses besides attracting beneficial insects. And what I do whenever they are done blooming and whenever they've made seed, I just kind of throw their seed around wherever I want them to grow and water a little bit here and there to just keep these beneficial herbs and flowers going as long as I can. And they keep reseeding themselves. So prevention does not look boring, it looks gorgeous. Some of the beneficial insects are what we call general predators. On the left, you see a praying mantis. The praying mantises, they actually come in at least 3 different colors from what I've observed. They're either green, where they kind of adapt to their surrounding green foliage, so you can hardly see them. If they hang out in more brown foliage, they actually turn brown themselves. So they have a great camouflage going. This one here is like very light beige, and probably because it's adapting to some of the flowers it's been hanging out as. So these general predators like praying mantis, and on the right, you see a yellow crab spider. They eat a variety of insects. Now, I have to admit they do not just eat what we call bad insects. They also eat the occasional bee, because to them, there's no bad or good insects. To them, there are only yummy insects. But they do manage to eat a lot of the caterpillars and other insects that we don't like on our plants. And that's why I keep them around. Same for the spiders. Now, going to the next element of prevention, from enlisting the help of beneficial insects away to actual doing something on our part. So what I like a lot in a sustainable garden are physical barriers. And I'm going to show you some of the physical barriers that work fantastic to keep bad insects out. On the left side, what you see here is a floating row cover. That is, you can't see what's underneath, but it's lettuce that's underneath. And the tender lettuce seedlings in the spring, they don't just get attacked by insects. They get eaten by the birds, by the ground squirrels. Everybody likes those tender lettuce plants. And so that white floating row cover basically makes your tender lettuce or whatever you have underneath there, it makes it invisible to insects and birds and so on. So they just don't even know it's there. And I go there early in the morning, lift it up and tend to it, water, fertilize, check it out, whatever needed, harvest. And then I put the floating row cover back on. In the background of it, you see a trellis, and along that trellis, there is peas, green peas growing up. Now, these green peas are already at a stage where they are sort of on the declining stage. So they don't need any cover, they're out in the open, and they are too hard at that point to be attractive to any insect or to any bird. So I'm just covering the tender stuff at the bottom. That's called floating row cover. The brand used to be called Remay, and it's still available under the Remay brand, but you can buy it at every good nursery. It's a great help for many things. Put it on top of kale to keep cabbage loopers out. Basically, it keeps the butterflies from laying their eggs on the kale, and then you have no caterpillars developing. In the picture on the right, I don't know if you can see that, I'm also growing a lot of vegetables in containers, half wine barrels. And I like to put a cage made of hardware cloth over the vegetables when they're still young and tender. And this is one of my cats that loves to sit on top of there. If I didn't have that cage there, she would sit on top of the vegetables. And so it does not just keep birds and bugs out, it also keeps cats and bigger critters out. So I love those cages, and I'll show you more of those. Now those cages, the holes are about 1 centimeter square. So smaller insects can definitely get in there. Pollinators can get in there, but it'll keep butterflies out that will lay their eggs on there, which turn into caterpillars, which we don't want on our greens. Here in the picture on the left, there is it's a squash that's called tromboncino that's growing in there, and that's a summer and a winter squash. You can harvest it in the early stages as a summer squash, or you can let it turn into a winter squash. And most squashes in their early stages are super soft and vulnerable. So what I do is I protect them with one of those little baggies that you can buy lemons or oranges in. It's a net bag. And I just kind of put that net bag over the squash and tie it with a rubber band or something. And I just leave it on until the skin of that squash becomes kind of hard enough that it will deter pests to go at it. You have to really check on that regularly because these squashes grow really fast. So they outgrow that netting pretty fast. And if you don't pay any attention, it will get tangled up in the netting, and then it's really messy. So, or it will get deformed from trying to grow inside of that netting. So you have to be able to check when it needs to come off. So you can already get the idea that in an organic sustainable garden, you the gardener needs to really be there every day and check up on things. This is the price you have to pay for not having toxins in your garden. On the right side, I'm using these little hardwire cloth cages to protect tender seedlings for the first week or two after planting. You know, the squashes and cucumbers grow pretty quickly, so they quickly outgrow those cages, but at least the cages are big enough to protect them in the first stage while they are the most vulnerable, usually to bird predation. In my garden, it's the birds that just pull out and eat these tender seedlings before they can even start growing. So those cages help me a lot, but they also help with butterflies and insects like that. So here's a kind of a beauty shot of a bad guy. Now that, I put that in there just to show you that some of the bad guys are actually incredibly beautiful insects, you know. And when you only have one of them, you can appreciate that beauty. But when you have like a whole family of them, like in the right picture, then it's not, you know, you can't appreciate the beauty anymore because they do a lot of damage. What you see here in the picture is a harlequin bug. And this harlequin bug likes to eat greens. It loves cabbage, kale, anything in the brassica family. And the picture on the left, you can still recognize it. It's still a green kale, even though it has a lot of feeding damage on it already. But in the picture on the right, there is probably at least 10 of those harlequin bugs, and they are sucking insects. They are sucking plant juices out. They're usually on the underside of the leaf, so if you don't look carefully, you may not even see them. This was a patch of kale that I had sort of forgotten about, and the only reason I noticed those bugs is because you can see the leaf is turning a weird, beautiful color. And I noticed that unusual color and I thought, what the hell is going on here? So I look at this leaf and I look at the underside and there's like a dozen of these bugs sucking on the underside of the leaf. Now, this stage of the game is called an infestation. And it's, you know, that kale is not salvageable, obviously, at that stage. But, you know, if I would have killed that first bug on the left when it came, I could have avoided that. These sucking insects, the true bugs, all true bugs are sucking insects, and you can recognize true bugs. They all have that kind of triangle on their back. Can you see that? It's either a triangle shape or a chevron shape on their back. and they're all sucking insects, and they are very hard to kill in their adult stage. The only insecticide that kills them at an adult stage is something that we don't want to use, really. Something like malathion and a really toxic stuff. So basically what I'm saying is, if you are one of the people like me who doesn't want to use things like that, there's nothing you can spray on this bug that's not super toxic that will kill it. So the only way to kill it is mechanically, basically. So I like to walk around in my garden in the morning with a little bucket of soapy water. And then I come by something like that. I take my little bucket, a small bucket of soapy water, and I just shake all those bugs into the soapy water and let them drown. If necessary, I will just hand pick them, brush them off the leaf into the soapy water. Or you can step on them. I mean, you have to basically mechanically kill them. Because mild insecticidal sprays, such as insecticidal soap, will do nothing to those things. I also want to show you a couple of fun facts of some of the annoying insects, so you can look at them not just as an annoying insect, but also as a marvel of nature, which they really are. A lot of the annoying insects, as much as I hate them in my garden, I kind of admire them for some of the features they have, because they are really just living miracles, Here's an aphid. It's one of the typical, frequently seen green aphids. And some of you might not know that, but aphids are capable of virgin birth. It's called parthenocarpy. It's a Greek word. All that means is they can give birth to live other aphids. They don't lay eggs. You can see the aphid in the picture is giving live birth to another aphid. And they can do that without mating, without having sex. So they can basically just clone themselves endlessly. Now, some varieties of aphids just keep doing that. Other varieties of aphids produce males toward the end of the year. And then the males and the females will mate. And they produce a hardier form of aphid, which is better suited to survive the winter. Those cloned aphids are not as hardy as the aphids produced by sexual reproduction, but they otherwise look exactly like the other aphids, and they grow just as fast, they can suck just as much plant juice, and they can multiply just as fast. You can see here that these aphids can give birth up to 12 times a day to live aphids. So, that's one of the things I find totally amazing and incredible. As much as I hate those little buggers, but they are little miracles. Aphids are sucking insects also. And here, my next slide is about the unfortunate fact that a lot of the times what we deal with in the garden is we don't actually see the insect that did the damage. All we see is the damage, and the insect already left or is hiding somewhere in a safe spot and just coming out at night. There's a lot of insects that actually feed at night that you don't see during the day. Earwigs is a great example. Earwigs come out in the middle of the night to feed. During the day, you never see them. They're hiding somewhere in a shady spot. And so a great way to deal with earwigs is you can, for instance, put some moistened rolled up newspapers out at night. And when they're done with their nightly feeding sessions, they will crawl into those rolled up newspapers to hide there during the day, so they think. And then you come in the morning and take that whole newspaper and dump it in a bucket of soapy water and kill them. Another thing you can do with earwigs is you can put an empty tuna can out and you tuna smelly oil in there. You take the fish out, but you leave the smelly oil in there, and you kind of put that can level, you want the top of the can to be level with the soil, and that earwig will crawl in there because it's attracted by the smelly tuna oil, and it will crawl in there and drown in that oil. So this is just an example of how we can deal with some of these insects. I actually like to deal with earwigs by going out in the middle of the night with a vacuum cleaner, because in the middle of the night, you can see hundreds of them out there feeding, and you just take a little vacuum cleaner and you vacuum them all up. You can have a dedicated little mini pest vacuum cleaner for that. It has to have fairly good suction though. So I have one of those little mini car vacuum cleaners, and it works for that. So On the top picture, so what you see is, when we see this picture, let's say we have a client come in the office and they bring us these leaves and say, you know, I got this problem here, look at these leaves, what's going on here? So we can see that in the top, you have holes in the leaves. It's a bean plant, a young bean plant. And seeing the holes in the leaves, you immediately know we're dealing with a chewing insect, because chewing insects chew holes, right? So chewing insects are earwigs, different kinds of beetles, caterpillars. So when I get that, I have to play detective. I know it's a chewing insect. I know it can be an earwig, even though we don't see any insect on it right now, but we know that earwigs come only out at night, so it could definitely be an earwig. Everybody okay? I know it's probably not a beetle because a beetle would be feeding right now and I don't see a beetle on it. Caterpillars make holes like that, but if it was a caterpillar, the hole would probably be a little bigger and I might still find the caterpillar, usually on the underside of the leaf, eating. Now, sometimes those caterpillars are camouflage colored green and they're not that easy to see, especially when they're small. But the caterpillar and the beetle would likely still be there. The fact that there's no insect there makes me think it's probably an earwig, you know? The plant on the bottom is a bean plant and it has this typical stippled appearance, which tells me it's a sucking insect because sucking insects suck the plant juices out. And with the plant juice, the chlorophyll comes out. The chlorophyll is what makes the plant green. So when they suck that chlorophyll out, in all those places where they've sucked, the chlorophyll is missing, and that's why you have all these white areas showing up. So we know this is the sucking insect. That could be aphids. If it was an aphid, it would still be on the underside of the leaf. You would be able to see it. Aphids are easily visible. Scales are also easily visible. Stink bugs, well, stink bugs can walk away. So a stink bug might have walked away. But in this case, when I look at this, I already know what it is. It's a typical problem on beans in the summer in Lake County. Almost every bean plant will get it in July, August. And it's called spider mites. They're tiny, tiny insects that are on the underside of the leaf sucking. They're so small that you usually don't see them until the problem's really bad, such as in this case here. But when you take a little magnifying glass and look at the underside of the leaf, you can see them. Sometimes if it's a really late stage and the leaf has already dried up, you don't see the spider mites anymore. All you see is the damage they've done. Here, this is another typical problem for Lake County. This is something that's going on right now at this time of the year. I have it at home and it's a picture from my garden. It's called leaf miners. And what you see here is these white splotches. Unfortunately, the picture is not very big. When you take a closer look, you would be able to see that there's literally white tunnels going through the leaf. On the upper picture of the spinach, on the right side of that spinach plant, you can see there's little tunnels going through that leaf. And these tunnels are made by the larva of a little fly. That fly lays her eggs on the underside of the leaf, the egg hatches, and the larva bores into the leaf, and it just makes tunnels between the upper and the lower epidermis of that leaf, eating the inside out. And the way to deal with that is basically early detection. Because again, you cannot really spray anything because it's on the inside of the leaf. So whatever you spray on the outside will not affect it. And the only thing you can do is remove the affected leaves as soon as you see this happening. Because if you don't remove the affected leaves, that insect will complete its life cycle and will turn into adult and lay more eggs and you'll have more problems. So nip it in the bud. Remove the affected leaves and dispose of them in such a way that they cannot finish their life cycle. Meaning, do not throw it in the compost. Do not throw it on the ground. Do not throw it anywhere where they can stay alive. You can either just boil the leaves, burn the leaves, put it in a plastic bag and close the plastic bag. That's somewhat unsustainable. I like to just, you know, either dip them in some boiling water or throw them in my fireplace, kill them, basically. On the picture on the lower right, this spinach has actually two different problems going on. You can see the leaf miner on the right edge of the leaf. And then if you take a close look, you can see this little yellow beetle with black dots. I know it's a small picture, but this is a cucumber beetle. It looks a little bit like a lady beetle, but it's a bad guy. And this little cucumber beetle is what has eaten the holes in this leaf. You can see the holes. That was the beetle at work. Now, this beetle is unlike a lady beetle. It's not really round. It's a little more oblong, not as nicely round as a lady beetle, but otherwise looks very much like a lady beetle. But it's greenish yellow with black dots. It can also come in greenish yellow with black stripes. Same insect, 2 variations. And these pests are also very hard to get rid of with benign insecticides. I have on your handout, which you're going to get a link to in the chat box. You have a little white paper write-up with links to where to get more help. And it'll tell you that one of the best things for cucumber beetles is hand picking and drowning in soapy water. Having your chickens go at it. Of course, the chickens will eat the spinach too, so that's not always a great solution. But products with neem seem to have some effect on killing them. But the way neem products work is neem causes insects to lose their appetite and stop eating, and that may take a while. So it does not immediately kill them. It basically just ruins their appetite and then they starve. So depending on how fast they eat, they may still be able to do quite a bit of damage. So I always like hand picking, going along, shaking the leaves, shaking the insects into a bucket of soapy water and killing them that way. I wanted to show you a few more pictures of real common insects in Lake County. On the top left here, you see a really great symbiosis. You see all those little pear-shaped green things? They're aphids multiplying frantically. And then what the ants are doing, the ants are actually tending those aphids like we tend cattle. They like to milk them because the aphids, they suck the plant juice, and the plant, they don't really, sucking is not the right word. They put their proboscis into the plant, and the plant juice literally just streams into them at a very fast rate. So that plant juice streams into them so fast, they cannot metabolize all of it. So what happens, they excrete the excess through their butt. They have these little 2 tubes on their butt, which you can see if you take a closer look with a magnifying glass. So all the excess plant juice that they cannot metabolize comes out their rear end, and the ants love to drink that, suck that up, and take it back to their nests. So the ants are basically, yeah, they're milking the aphids. And because the ants like that, ants tend to actually put aphids on plants where they want to start a colony. So when you want to get rid of aphids, sometimes you have to get rid of the ants at the same time, because you can kill all the aphids. The ants will actually bring more aphids back to that plant because they want to harvest the juice of the aphids. So you can see the problem is, nature is much more complicated than we tend to assume sometimes, right? So that's one thing that's going on. The top right picture is an insect that you rarely see because it's so small. It's called thrips. And this is a female western flower thrip. They tend to be inside the blossoms of fruit trees or inside the blossoms of vegetables, and they feed in that flower, and because they're so small, you don't really see them. And in that blossom, the fruit is already forming. You know, that fruit could be your summer vegetable, like a tomato is already forming, or the peach is already forming, the plum is already forming. And that thrip insect will eat the tiny, will bite holes, will not bite holes, but will put its proboscis, stinger, into that forming fruit, put a hole in it and suck on it. And you don't know what's going on because this is all happening still inside the flower when everything is tiny, tiny, right? So as that fruit gets bigger, you notice that it has all these little marks where something used to suck. And then later on, you open up the fruit and it has all these discolored spots in there that taste kind of bitter, you know, and ugly. And this is all something that happened way back when the fruit was just forming. So by the time people notice the damage, it's usually way too late to do anything about it, and the thrips have already moved on to some other plant. So the problem is by the time you see the damage that it caused, the insect's actually not even there anymore. But I wanted you to know what it looks like and just be aware of that. This is something that's going on in your garden while you don't notice it, usually. The insect on the bottom left is a spider mite. This is the two-spotted spider mite. You can tell why by looking at the picture. And it's sucking juices out of leaves from the underside of the leaves. And this is what caused the bean plant on the previous slide to look as ugly as it did. On the bottom right, we have a earwig. We all know that, right? So earwigs are chewing insects, and you can see it's taken a chunk out of that plant right there. And on and on and on. So there is like 300 something of these insects commonly occurring in gardens that can do damage to our plants. Needless to say, we're not going to be able to talk about all of them today, but I want to make sure today that you know where to go to find this information, because the websites we use are not a secret. Everybody can use them. So the IPM website is kind of a wonderful tool. And this was the, oh, here we are back at the beneficial insects. Okay. Should probably show you that one first. To see what beneficial insects look like, you go to this link, and I have all these links on a, on the white paper for you. Anyway, there is a gallery on the IPM website, Natural Enemies Gallery, that has just about every beneficial insect known with a picture and a description of its life cycle here. I'm just going to click on one to show you what you get to see there. This is an assassin bug. An assassin bug, as the name says, eats bad guys. And this is what the assassin bug looks like in its different life stages. So this website and this particular link is a great way to familiarize yourself with what the good guys look like. So when you see an insect on your plant, you don't automatically assume this is something you need to kill. It may actually be your friend. Going back, whoops, what happened? This is what I was going to show you. Going back to the pests here, when you go to the upper link, a lot of the time people come in, let's say, with a bean leaf that has pest damage. And of course, at this point, we have no idea who the pest was. So if you go to this website, you can find your pest organized by plant host. So you're on the website right now. I'm going to go to beans just to see which pests are actually a problem on beans. And what you're going to get to see here is beans with all their potential pests. Here's the invertebrate pests. And you can see from top down, beans can have problems with aphids, armyworms, bean weevils, corn earworms, cucumber beetles, cutworms, etc., etc., etc. So then all you have to do is click on one of those to see what they look like. Let's just click on, actually let's click on spider mites, since this is what we looked at before. So spider mites, and it shows you right there what spider mites look like and what they look like and what the damage looks like on a leaf. Now this is very last stage infestation. Most of the time it will not look that bad yet when you see the problem. If you take a magnifying glass, you can see these guys on the underside of the leaf. This is what the leaf looks like when it's pretty much history on the underside. And the spider mites have made a huge colony. You can even see a little bit of the webbing. Now, don't be surprised. A lot of the time you actually don't see the webbing. These spider mites, my guess is sometimes it's too hot for them to make webbing. So they're sucking without webbing, but you can see them with a magnifying glass. So anyway, this is all the problems you can find on a bean. And as you can see, it doesn't just show you the pests you can find on a bean, it shows you all the diseases you can find on beans. And it shows you the environmental disorders that are commonly a problem on beans. Isn't that a fantastic tool? So you have the link to this. It's the first one organized by host plant. Then let's just assume we already know which pest we're dealing with. We also have it organized by pest name. Down there. Now my cursor disappeared. Here it is. No, that's not what I wanted. Somehow the link wasn't working. Yeah, for some reason the link's not working. I'm not sure what's going on. I have to check that out. But on the lower link, let's try that again. Well, it doesn't want to do it right now. Anyway, on the lower link, which I'm going to fix, you will get the pests organized by pest name alphabetically. I can actually get there via the upper one too. Let's try that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here. And on this page, you see, this is what the other link was supposed to go to. Go to the pests organized alphabetically by pest name. If you already know what you're dealing with, like let's say you know you have aphids, you click on aphids, and then what you get is a really in detail dissertation on how to identify aphids, what their life cycle looks like, what the different kinds of aphids look like, what the damage looks like that they do, and how you manage them, how you monitor them, etc., etc., etc. You can see that this paper goes into great detail about everything you ever wanted to know about aphids, including the different pictures of the different types of aphids. And you can see here that aphids come in many colors, but they always have the same shape. Anyway, so this is the second link that I'm going to need to fix what that was going to show you. So this is where you get help, where you can actually look up those things, right? On the next page, this is a link that has a gallery of beneficial insects. We were already there. That shows you what the beneficial insects look like, so you don't accidentally kill the wrong guys. Don't want to kill your friends. And it comes in a short version and in a long version, depending on how much patience you have. First link is the short version, second link is the long version. And another link that I added here that's really helpful is, let's just say you've done all the right things, you've done all the prevention, you took care of your vegetables as best as you can, and you hand-picked off the first few insects you saw, but for some reason, maybe you had to go away for a few days, or for whatever reason, you all of a sudden have more insects than you want to handpick, and you decide you actually do want to see if there isn't a relatively benign insecticide that you could use. I have a link to a list here of the least toxic pesticides. So this link will lead you to part of the IPM website that talks about the least toxic insecticides, not by brand name, but by active ingredient. And as you can see, organic gardeners don't have a lot of choices in terms of pesticides. We basically have soaps. Soaps kill insects by, causing damage to their outer exoskeleton, to their coating, and causing them to dry out. Then there's the insecticidal oils, and most of the time it's just mineral oil. Sometimes it's mineral oil with a little bit of neem oil. But insecticidal oil, even if it's just a mineral oil, what that does is basically kills an insect mechanically by clogging up its breathing apparatus. It basically smothers the insect, and it doesn't really kill it chemically, it actually kills it mechanically. So oil smothers insects. Soap dries them out. Then there is some microbial insecticides, such as BT, which is short for Bacillus thuringiensis. That is a bacterium that specifically attacks caterpillars. It will not attack anything other than caterpillars. So, and that bacteria is something that you can apply as an insecticide, and it will kill your caterpillars. It's relatively harmless to anything, it's harmless to anything else. Then there is a virus that only affects codling moth. I don't know if you know what codling moth is. It's the worm in the apple or in the pear. So there is an insecticide that's a virus that is specifically attacking only this particular moth in its larval stage. And there's a product called spinosad. It's an organically approved insecticide that controls also caterpillars, leaf miners, and thrips, but it can harm some beneficial insects. So it's to be used with caution. It's not really toxic, but it's like sort of on the borderline. Then there is, of course, beneficial nematodes. Beneficial nematodes are tiny little worms. And that's something that you're not going to deal with. But if you had a big farm, you might actually want to invest in buying beneficial nematodes and releasing them, let's say, in your greenhouse. It's not something that home gardeners really deal with, so I'm not going to get into it. And then there's some botanical insecticides, such as pyrethrins. Pyrethrin is super toxic, even though it's organic and botanical, but it's super toxic. It kills everything, but only for 24 hours. So after 24 hours, it's no longer active. So if you use it very wisely at a time when there are no beneficial insects out, because it will kill everything, but it will disintegrate in the environment after 24 hours. Azadirachtin is the active ingredient in neem, comes in many different brand name products. And then there's various mixtures of garlic, hot pepper, peppermint oil, clove oil, etc. But some of these products are actually likely to kill your plant too, not just, especially the essential oil products are often pretty aggressive, and you can harm your plants as well as the insects. On the bottom is a list of things you don't want to use. So anyway, this is the help that you can all get to just with those simple links. So I'm just basically trying to tell you that there is no secret to where we get our information from. All these websites we get our information from are available to all of you. And I can direct you there either through this presentation and you get the link, or you can call me and I can email you the link. You know, there's many ways to it, or you can explore a little bit yourself. This is just, we're gonna have to finish here in a minute. This is just a beauty shot. I put it in because sometimes when everything goes wrong inside your bed, I sometimes find that the vegetables inside my bed just don't turn out the way I expected, despite my best efforts. But then miraculously, all around the bed is volunteer lettuce and parsley and edible flowers and kale sprouting. And sometimes there's more good eating to be had by the side of the bed than actually in the bed. So don't discount that, you know? Eat what's growing around your beds too, basically. And if all else fails and you really don't know what to do, we have a hotline number that you can call. At the moment, it's a bit of a problem because of coronavirus. There's actually nobody in the office, but our office manager comes in twice a week to check messages and then let me know what's going on. Or you can just email, that's much better. Email your questions to the email address that you see on the screen. clake@ucanr.edu is the Master Gardener email address. And so whenever you really don't know what to do, just call us or email us and we'll help you, and we will point you toward more help. Or, you know, you have the option of bringing us a sample of the problem. We prefer that comes in a sealed Ziploc bag so we don't spread the problem. And here's the address of our office at the bottom. That about is it as far as what I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was such a lot of rich information and useful for everyone. I hope everyone learned a lot to take back to their gardens at home and enjoyed watching. We learned a lot about pests in a vegetable garden and how to manage those pests. And as Gabrielle said, we did post some links in the chat box for some handouts that have a copy of all those links, so you can access those. If you are interested in us emailing you a copy of this recording or emailing those links to you, you can put your email in the chat box and we can send those after the presentation. I didn't see that there was any questions. We didn't get a chance to let people know that they can post their questions in the chat, but I wanted to open it up and just see if there was anybody that had any questions that Gabrielle could answer for them. And I hope people can unmute themselves. And while we're waiting, I'm going to put our gardening class schedule up for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if you're not able to unmute yourself, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon at the bottom.
Thank you, Gabrielle. That was very interesting. I'm
You're
here
welcome.
reading garden here, our new garden, and I'm
You're
listening.
welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I like the pictures and the whole presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a deep subject, but also a lot of fun, you know.
Yes.
And you can tell that, you know, as much as I'm a gardener, I'm also a bug aficionado. And I can appreciate even the bad bugs for their beauty and their miraculous existence, you know.
Right. Exactly.
So, and I think every gardener can, you know, we have kind of a love-hate relationship with bad bugs.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So I hope everyone can see my screen here. This is our schedule for our virtual garden classes. So we have actually we're going to be doing them every other Friday at 10 a.m. And it's not going to be a garden class. We're doing a planter drive-through giveaway. And I can send that information to you by email as well if you're interested in learning more about that. That will be on June 12th down at Legacy Court on Parallel Drive, where our new garden site is located. And then the next garden class will be Container Gardening Tips with Gabrielle on June 26th at 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And then after that, we'll have Barbara Howe with CalFresh Healthy Living doing a food demonstration with some...
Sarah?
Yes.
I want to say for the garden giveaway that they need to call Shelby to reserve their their container for the June 12th.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
Just want to say that just so nobody just shows up to get a bag, they need to reserve it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you can put your email in the chat box too if you want me to forward you Shelby's information. Okay, and that concludes our first virtual garden class. Thank you again, Gabrielle, for hosting that. We learned a lot, and we look forward to having you come back on June 26th.
It will be a pleasure.
Great, thank you so much. Have
a great day, everybody.
You too, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.